This is your Thursday Daily Delivery. I am Michael Rand. Plenty of stuff to talk about today. Going to get into some more Vikings discussion here in a little while. Some thoughts on Mike Zimmer. Some thoughts on a comparison between two quarterbacks that you might not have thought to make a comparison between, but I am going to go there. Phil Miller, Twins beat writer, will also join me here in a little while to catch us up on the baseball offseason. The lockout is continuing, but it sounds like the two sides will resume discussions today after a lengthy layoff. Is there any hope there? Where do we stand with the start of spring training, with the start of the regular season? And how is this all impacting the Twins, a team that still have a lot of roster moves to make, still don't have a lot of pitching on this year's team? It's going to be a mad scramble, sounds like, from Phil Miller as soon as this is resolved. But first, what did I miss? Talk a little bit of Gophers men's and women's basketball here at The Jump. We'll start with the men because that was the game on Wednesday that had a little bit more drama to it. We're not in the point, I think, where we're happy or satisfied with moral victories. And just in general, I don't like the idea of a moral victory. You can be, satisfied with an effort without kind of diving into that category. So a last-second loss at Michigan State, a team ranked in the top 10. They flashed a graphic during that game. Gophers haven't beaten a top 10 team on the road in almost a decade, which means they did not do it at all during the Richard Pitino coaching era. But to get close against Michigan State, to have that game tied 69-69 in the closing seconds, and, unfortunately for them to give up that layup at the end, on a pretty good play by Michigan State, give them credit, to lose 71-69, and to see big man Eric Curry go down in that final minute, too. That felt, I think at the start of the year, if you would have thought they're going to lose by 2 at Michigan State, you'd be like, okay, that's a pretty... we'll take that. I think this team has raised expectations enough, though, that still felt like a tough loss. Now, 1-4 in the Big Ten. Like I said, plenty to like from that game. I think that one kind of reaffirmed to me that this team will be more competitive than we thought. And that 1-4, by the way, includes 3 losses to Michigan State and Illinois combined. Both of those teams undefeated in the Big Ten, very good teams. We'll learn more about where this Gophers team is ultimately going to finish once they start playing teams that are a little bit closer in the standings and in caliber to them. I mean, they still have that win at Michigan. They still, their other loss was Indiana, which is off to a pretty good start this season. When they start to play Rutgers, Penn State, Northwestern, Maryland, Nebraska, that's those are going to be their real opportunities to bank some wins and maybe kind of catch up in the standings, or at least have that respectable record that they were trending toward at the start of the year. But I don't think there's any shame in this. Ben Johnson, head coach, broke down the final play and what he liked overall from the effort.
It was a broken play a little bit. I'd have to watch it again, just going off a lot. But I think it was a broken play. Gave it a little back cut and they would get downhill, and we kind of helped up the floor a little bit too late. And was able to give up the dump down. But I'll say this, the fight that I thought our guys had to get it to that point, if there were a couple of times during the game where they could have easily folded. And, it's a tough place to play. And they didn't give in to the crowd. They didn't give in to the momentum. They just kept coming, and they gave us a chance. And I think that's really all you can ask for is to give you a chance, and they did that.
And the real thing to watch going forward is what's the health of Curry's ankle? Is he going to be out for a couple weeks? Is he going to be out for 6 weeks? It looked pretty bad. He couldn't put any weight on it after he came down on it in that final minute. So we're going to have to see his status because they don't have much depth, especially in the front court. And if he's out for any length of time, that would be a tough one to overcome. Not like they can't do it. They've been persevering all year. They've been overachieving to a large degree all year, but that would be a pretty tough one to overcome. So the rest of their season largely hinges on, can they keep playing at a high level, and is Eric Curry going to come back healthy sooner rather than later? Like I said at the jump, Gopher women's basketball part of this discussion. They beat Wisconsin 82-66 on Wednesday night. Lindsey Whalen 4-0 as a head coach at Wisconsin. That will earn you a lot of praise in Minnesota. The Gophers off to kind of a slow start this season, but again, a tough schedule for them early on as well. Let's see if they can pick things up a little bit more as the season goes along. Tough start to the year for Lindsey as well. Coming back to coach this game after an emergency appendectomy knocked her out earlier this season. So, maybe some more promising times ahead, certainly for the Gophers next season as they welcome a very celebrated recruiting class. But this is an important year still for them to kind of prove that they are on the way up and not just stuck in some kind of neutral gear. Making the NCAA tournament this season shouldn't be a unrealistic expectation. So winning that one at Wisconsin was a big deal for sure.
Take a playcation to Mystic Lake for 24/7 gaming, fun restaurants and bars, and luxurious hotel rooms. And join Club M to bask in the rewards. Follow the lights to Mystic Lake, where every day is play day.
Phil Miller joins Daily Delivery right now, covers the Twins, of course, and probably hasn't had a lot to do, unfortunately, in the last month, 6 weeks, however long this lockout has been going on, because what normally is the hot stove portion of the season, if you want to call it, has been pretty cold, has it not, Phil?
It has been boring. It reminds me of the Terry Ryan regime, where they would, after the winter meetings, he would shut everything down and in December and pick up again in January. The current administration, the Twins, usually keeps a little busier than that, and January is their big month, and there's nothing going on Twins wise, negotiations wise. It's 6 weeks now, the lockout on Thursday, and everything seems frozen in place.
Now, that said, reports suggest that the sides are going to at least meet for the first time in 6 weeks on Thursday, and who knows what comes of that, if it becomes a quick hello and goodbye and they don't meet again for a while, or if there's actual progress to it. How do you read the fact that they're at least going to attempt to talk again on Thursday?
Well, I think what's been clear is that they've decided, Major League Baseball essentially has decided that nothing can get done without a deadline staring them in the face. Nothing can get done unless there's a desperate scramble to get something done where the pressure is on. So they've essentially wasted 6 weeks. They know what the issues are. They made some modest attempt to do some negotiating at the deadline before the lockout began, and they've gone dark for 6 weeks. And the entire reason is to put pressure on the players to start feeling the heat that we're going to mess up the season. We're going to start spring training late. We're going to start the season late if something doesn't get done. It's all about leverage, which is negotiating tactics 101, I suppose. But it is kind of a shame in this instance that it's dragging on so long. My guess, I thought they might talk a little bit in December. Now that they haven't, my guess has always been that spring training would start late, probably not until a week or two into March, and that the season will end up getting pushed back by a week or two from the March 31st start. That becomes a real danger now because the sides remain far apart. They both issued press releases the day the lockout began, making it pretty clear that there's still a lot of work to be done, a lot of issues to be settled, and a lot of them are going to be contentious. So I don't see any way to complete them and start spring training on time. It's supposed to be 4 weeks from now.
As we think about those issues, maybe we can kind of, you can outline a few of those core issues. And even if they've been talking about these issues for years, how are they supposed to bridge that gap in a matter of weeks now at this point? Like, how do they suddenly come together? Is it just that deadline pressure where they don't want to miss too much and someone's got to blink at some point? Or do you think there will be an actual compromise or a fair deal at some point here?
It seems clear that both sides want to leverage the other into making a concession that they don't want to make. And maybe it'll happen. I have to say that the negotiations that start tomorrow, according to the USA Today, will not include any proposals on changing free agency and changing the arbitration rules. And that is a large concern of baseball's middle class. That's kind of the issue for guys who are kind of being caught in baseball's evolution towards using younger and cheaper players and being less inclined to pay players after the age of 30, which is kind of the way the system is set up now. So there's a huge middle class of players that are not going to be very happy that that issue isn't even going to be addressed. According to reports from New York, the issues that they're going to address are maybe raising the luxury tax threshold, maybe try to find some way to disincentivize tanking, maybe by changing the draft rules, but nothing that is going to deliver more money, significantly more money to the vast majority of players that don't sign 9-figure long-term contracts.
You know, and there's been examples on the Twins, I think, in recent years. I think a guy like Brian Dozier got a little squeezed by that, you know, a guy who maybe didn't start accumulating his service time till a little bit later in his career. Then all of a sudden he's 30, 31 before he can get paid and never really gets that big payday. I'm not sure if there's any current Twins who specifically fall into that category, but it's got to be frustrating for a player when you're under this quote unquote cost control and you see this kind of two-class system emerge, and, you know, where it's either the really, really good players who do get paid, or it's the cheaper young players that are on these rosters.
Yeah, baseball front offices have changed the game off the field as much as they've changed the game on it with the shifting and the use of pitching and all that. They have good evidence that younger players in their first 6 years, that's when players are the most valuable, and that's certainly when their contracts are the most valuable because they're cheap. So it's a difficult, and another root of difficulty in these negotiations is the Players Association represents the millionaires and the multi-millionaire players, as well as all the minimum salary players. You know, the Twins used 57 players last season, franchise record. More than 30 of them, or roughly 30 of them, were minimum salary players who got shuffled in and out, you know, all the relief pitchers. And so the union has to negotiate an agreement that helps both classes and kind of the middle class. You mentioned Dozier. Nobody's crying for a guy that made close to $30 million during his career, but had he reached free agency 2 years earlier, he might have gotten a contract worth $80 million, $90 million. But, by the time he reached 6 years of service time, he was already in the decline phase and never got to cash in the way so many star players do.
So as we think about this not being a quick fix, you know, there's not going to be an interminable lockout. They're not going to like 2025 with no baseball, but, you know, as this potentially drags out for a while and maybe costs them some spring training, maybe costs them some off season, maybe costs them a start on time to the regular season. How does this impact a team like the Twins that would seem to have a lot of holes to fill, issues to address after, you know, a disappointing 2021 season in which they thought they were going to be pretty good, maybe even a World Series contender, and ended up losing almost 90 games?
Yeah, they have money to spend and holes to fill. There are some bullpen holes. There are no starting pitchers on the squad with more than 1 year of experience, except for Dylan Bundy, kind of a reclamation project that they signed right before the lockout began. The Twins are going to go through a 2-week scramble to try to put together this roster, and I wonder if they'll be able to accomplish that. I wonder if much of the free agent pitching, the rush to the lockout took a lot of the pitchers off of the market. There isn't much left to sign. That means the Twins' best route to adding another starting pitcher or two is through a trade. Transactions are not supposed to be going on during the lockout. You wonder if front offices are having some informal talks that might produce some trades when the time comes. But how they're going to fill the hole at shortstop, how much they trust the young guys coming up. If it's a shortened spring training, if it's a 2-week period to try to put together a roster, it could be a really patchwork year after 2 seasons that have already been disrupted by COVID. Baseball just cannot find a sense of normalcy that it had for so long.
It hasn't, and it's unfortunately too, it's kind of one of those things where in sports these days the off season seems to be almost as important for chatter, for kind of growing the game, for growing the popularity of a game as anything else. You look at NBA draft and free agency, you look at NFL draft and free agency. Those are the times where those leagues really, zoom up in popularity and interest. And Major League Baseball is missing out on weeks, months of that at a time where popularity, frankly, has continued to dip.
Yeah, not good timing. Like everything else during this COVID era, it's bad timing all around. It's like, how about the players? Timing? The collective bargaining agreement comes up for negotiation on the heels of the 2 lowest attendance years that baseball has had in a couple of decades. So it's it is unfortunate. There would be news going on now. There would be rumors. There would be a lot of storylines to chase. A lot of options. Is Royce Lewis going to make the team? Are they going to sign someone to play shortstop? And of course, the annual questions about the pitching. We would be writing about this. We'd be talking about this every day. On the heels of the explosion of long 3.5-hour games and the lack of interest that more and more fans are showing, I think they can bounce back pretty easily. But the timing of this has been pretty unfortunate for baseball. So should we just talk about Mike Zimmer and the Vikings coach if you want?
I've talked about that enough. I do want to talk about a slightly happier subject, which is Wednesday, the Twins announced plans to retire Jim Cott's number, of course, going into the Hall of Fame, as well as Tony Oliva. That announced about a month ago or so as part of that kind of, next, taking another look at some of these guys from past years and do they deserve to be in the Hall. I think Jim Cott certainly worthy of that. Just kind of a nice story, something to kind of divert from the other things that are going on here. Not a surprise that they would do it because they've basically done that for anybody who is in the Hall of Fame, correct? Mm-hmm.
Most teams are like that. If you make the Hall of Fame, you get your numbers retired. And in the Twins case, you get a statue too. There's a backlog now, but I would assume there's a statue of Jim Cott in the works.
That's a nice little story. I mean, I don't know how much we talked about Cott and Oliva previously, because that probably happened during a lot of this kind of dead period. But, I think Cott was one of those pitchers that kind of went overlooked in team history. But when you look at his overall numbers, I mean, my gosh, he really had the counting stats to warrant, some of the accolades that have now come his way.
Yeah, and he would be the first guy, and in fact, this probably hurt his Hall of Fame chances before now. He would be the first guy to admit that he was never a dominating pitcher. He was never, he was not the Koufax and Seaver of his time, that he was just a guy that was pretty good for a long time. It's interesting how he kind of lost touch with the Twins, I think, with Twins fans, because his career did go on so long. It went on for another decade after he left the Twins. And so by the time he retired, he seemed as much a Yankee or a White Sox as he did a Twin. And he has more recently, in the last few years, more embraced the Twins, embraced that past and the franchise. And I think, he's done some broadcast some games every year. He's in town more. And the franchise has embraced him back. It was interesting to me how the city seemed to get behind Tony Oliva, because he lives here and he's one of us for 5 decades, and it seemed like people really wanted him to get in. And then Cott too. That's right, Cott was pretty good. So it's kind of nice that he is kind of come home, so to speak, with his career, and is much more identifies with the Twins, as evidenced by the fact that it'll be a Twins logo on his cap.
And about as good a broadcaster as you will find as well. Don't know how much you've heard his work over the years, but sure. He's very good at that.
Sure, yeah, and then there's a reason he was on national broadcasts all these years. The guy's won like 7 Emmys in addition to his Hall of Fame credentials. So it is great for him. He's 83, and it is. I think he is enjoying the kind of the renaissance of recalling him. You really don't hear much about the Metropolitan Stadium days anymore around here, it seems like. And so celebrating Tony Oliva and Jim Cott this summer in Cooperstown, I think will be really fun for people around the franchise.
Something there to look forward to, and maybe we'll look forward to a resolution to this labor standoff. We'll see what comes of all the talks Thursday and see if something comes of that bears some fruit in the short term, or at least the medium term. And when that happens, Phil, I'm sure we will talk again. Enjoy whatever downtime you're getting here. I know it's boring, but sometimes boring at least means you're getting some well-deserved rest, and we'll catch you again soon, okay?
Okay, Mike. Look forward to it.
Good to catch up with Phil Miller. As always, does a great job covering the Twins for the Star Tribune. I hope he gets more to write about soon, because baseball, like I told him, it's been out of sight, out of mind for me for more than a month, and they're just losing a lot of this off-season goodwill that they would normally have, a lot of this off-season attention they would normally have, and people start to tune things out. It's not like they can't come back. You felt like there was a point where other sports were going through some of this same thing, and they have bounced back, but baseball's in kind of a perilous point right now, and I don't think they can afford to have this drag out much longer. Let's shift to the Vikings for a little while here. Some of the general manager scuttlebutt has been kind of drifting, sifting out. We covered a lot of that on Wednesday's Access Vikings podcast, so please go have a listen to that. I have a different thing I want to talk about, actually 2 things I want to talk about. We haven't heard from Mike Zimmer since he was fired on Monday, other than a statement he released, and I listed that. I read off that statement a couple days ago on the podcast. Here's what I'm thinking right now. Mike Zimmer has had many moments of major honesty in his years as Vikings head coach, and there's a lot of questions at this point left unanswered after hearing other players talk, after kind of thinking about his 8-year tenure. So here are 5 questions I would love to ask Mike Zimmer. Number 1, a big one. Does he think Kirk Cousins cost him his job? And that's not to say, does he think Kirk Cousins was a bad quarterback? I think objectively, nobody would say Kirk Cousins has been a bad quarterback over these last 4 years, but we've all, gone back to that quote from Zimmer before the 2018 season, before they signed Kirk Cousins at that scouting combine, where he said, if we pick the wrong quarterback, I'll probably get fired. Let's not go all in and forget kind of what got us here to this point. Let's not spend so much, paraphrasing him at this point, but let's not spend so much that we can't, keep the kind of team we've had. Now, does he think that, after they brought in Kirk Cousins, they only made the playoffs 1 out of 4 years. They were right around 500 as a team during that stretch. Does he think Kirk Cousins cost him his job in that they were on a certain path before they spent so much money on a quarterback, and then after that they could not afford the sort of roster depth, especially on defense, needed to compete in the way Mike Zimmer wanted to compete? Along those lines, another Cousins-related question: what exactly happened during that end-of-game weirdness on the sidelines when Cousins shouted, "You like that," in Zimmer's face after Cousins had rallied them in the final moments for that long field goal that rescued them in that game they were about to give away to Detroit? What exactly was that moment about? Because both of them tried to brush it off after it happened, but if you remember, Zimmer basically shoved Cousins, and I don't know if it was a playful shrug in some way. It didn't look like it, or if it was kind of a two guys kind of getting something out there. I don't know what it was, but I don't think we got a full answer in the moment. I would love to go back and ask him, what was there more to that? Because it's been lingering in my mind ever since it happened. Third question is more of just a general question, more of an upbeat one that I would like to ask him. What does he think his greatest accomplishment was as Vikings head coach? Was it, turning the team around from the direction it had been in? I mean, remember, they'd lost double-digit losses 3 of the 4 seasons before he got here, 2010, 2011, and 2013. So he came in, restored credibility pretty fast, and started competing really fast. Was he more proud of winning the division in his second year and winning that game at Lambeau in Week 17 to clinch the division? Was he proud of the 2017 season where they overcame a lot and got to the NFC title game? I'd like to know what he was most proud of, what his biggest accomplishment was in his time here. Conversely, number 4, what was his single greatest disappointment in a season? And there's plenty of candidates there, whether it's individual moments or the way seasons transpired. Was it the missed field goal in the playoffs in 2015? Was it a 5-0 start in 2016, giving way to an 8-8 finish without a playoff appearance? Was it coming up a game short of the Super Bowl in 2017? Was it, 2018 not being able to get into the playoffs, beat the Bears towards the end to get into the playoffs? Was it these last 2 years where they just, weren't really competitive on defense? I'm guessing it's maybe how the defense came apart, but I don't know. When you think about it and you have a chance to kind of take it all in, as a whole, there's a lot to get to there. Final question's a little bit different than disappointment. The biggest regret, and that gets to more or less of a something that happened and more of a something you did. Was it his handling of Daniel Carlson and, not recognizing that you had to kind of ride out a rough patch with a kicker? Was it some of the culture stuff that Eric Kendricks and Brian O'Neill were hinting at or directly getting at in their comments on Monday? Could he have realized some things earlier on in his tenure? Was it his relationship with Kirk Cousins that maybe turned that experience in Cousins' 4 years into a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy that did ultimately get Zimmer fired? I don't know. I would love to find out all of those things and more from Mike Zimmer. We will see when he is available, if and when he does a sit-down or whatnot, and find out some of the answers to some of those questions at some point, I hope. Let's finish with the cooler. The symmetry of some statistics caught my eye as we thought about the Vikings and the end of this season. Kirk Cousins in 2021, 16 starts, 66.3% completion rate, 4,221 yards, 33 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, and an 8-8 record. He, of course, missed that game against Green Bay, so only 16 games in this 17-game season. Brett Favre in 2009 for the Vikings, we consider one of the best quarterback seasons the Vikings have ever had. 16 starts, 68.4% completion rate, 4,202 yards, 33 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, 12-4 record. Same number of touchdowns, same number of interceptions as Kirk Cousins. Yards were within 19 of each other. Similar number of pass attempts, very, very similar completion rate. One of them won 4 more games and is celebrated. One of them lost 4 more games and maybe will get traded, and the coach got fired and the general manager got fired. So what gives with that? I asked you guys on Twitter. I'm probably going to write about this today. A lot of factors. Obviously, it's easier to pass for that many yards these days. You've got, passing rules have changed in the last 12 years. I think Favre, though, had a better supporting cast, including offensive line was way better in 2009. I think the playmakers were probably similar, but those of you who pointed out that, Cousins got to throw to Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, he had Dalvin Cook. Yeah, well, Brett Favre had Adrian Peterson in his prime. He had Sidney Rice having a great season. Bernard Berrian, an accomplished receiver. Rookie Percy Harvin was a monster in so many facets of the game. So I think the playmakers were kind of a wash. A lot of different factors, though, up and down. Third downs, Favre and the Vikings were much better on third downs that season than Cousins and the Vikings were this year. I think the Favre and the Vikings, though, had an element of luck that year. They pulled some games out. That San Francisco game, of course, with the Greg Lewis catch. They won a game when Baltimore missed a field goal. I think ultimately, though, what most of you wanted this to prove is that Favre had an impact beyond statistics, and that there are some things, even in the advanced numbers, that showed that he had a much greater impact than Cousins did this year. So I'm going to dissect that a little bit more in a blog post on Thursday. But the symmetry in the numbers is what caught my eye. Cousins and Favre with almost identical statistical counting numbers in 2021 versus 2009. That will do it for today. Mark Craig should be on Friday's show with NFL picks and probably to get his perspectives on everything that has happened in the Vikings world this week. I'm sure we'll talk some Wolves tomorrow, too, coming off of a big game Thursday night against the Grizzlies. Have a great rest of your Thursday. I'm Michael Rand. Thanks for joining me here on Daily Delivery.